Okay, let's start on time.
I'm not gonna. I got him. Stay here the whole time.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As I always believe on starting on time, it is now 10 o'clock on the hour, and we have another great day in D.C. Only 100 degrees today, so be thankful we're in this nice air condition. My name is Nick Larigakis, president of the American Hellenic Institute, and I thank you for being with us here today. On behalf of the AHI, our nonprofit independent Greek-American Public Policy Center, it is my pleasure to present the policy forum, Cyprus and the EU Presidency, Institutional, Political, Strategic, and Economic Challenges. A momentous occasion for the Republic of Cyprus occurred on July 1, when it assumed the rotating presidency of the European Union. It is the first time since Cyprus joined the EU in 2004 that it will hold this position. This historic event presents Cyprus with significant challenges and yet great opportunities. The economic crisis that has embroiled the EU will undoubtedly consume a large portion of Cyprus's agenda as it strives to meet the set of priorities it has set out to achieve during the 6-month program of the presidency under the theme, Towards a Better Europe. But also, it serves as a painful reminder for Cyprus. Cyprus's rise to join the EU and eventually take the helm of its rotating presidency is truly amazing, especially when one stops to consider how far Cyprus has had to come since it was the victim of brutal, illegal invasion by Turkey that occurred 38 years ago this very Friday. To this very day, Turkey continues to illegally occupy 37% of the Republic of Cyprus. Yes, astonishingly, the same Republic of Cyprus that is currently leading the European Union. And Turkey continues to issue bellicose threats towards Cyprus. The latest example, as Cyprus rightfully explores for hydrocarbon reserves within its exclusive economic zone. This potential energy find can further augment Cyprus's geopolitical importance to the region, to Europe, and to even the United States. In sum, Cyprus's standing today in Europe speaks volumes of the resilience of the Greek Cypriots. Ladies and gentlemen, our purpose today is to take a more in-depth look at the meaning of Cyprus's EU presidency, to examine its challenges, which are manifold, and reflect on Cyprus's rise to assume its current position. To do so, we've assembled a panel of experts whose thorough research, analysis, and perspective on this topic we are pleased to share with you. We look forward to hearing their presentations. So we thank you for being here today in attendance, and we welcome you once again. And now, what I will do is I will pass the remaining program for this morning to a very able Paul Glasseris, which a man who really needs no introduction of all his great works that he's done for presidents, and now publisher of the monthly, sometimes you do get a brain lock. And he will carry the program for the rest of the day. Again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Nick. Thank you, Ahi, for putting this on. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Good crowd. We have a terrific panel today, and I don't want to get between you and them. And I'm not going to give extensive bios. They're in your package. But we have with us Professor Van Koufidakis. We have Dr. Antonia Delacia. We have Bill Lovelace and Kurt Volker. They're going to be talking about a variety of issues around Cyprus's accession to the EU presidency, and I think we should just jump right in with Professor Van Koufidakis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the American Hellenic Institute for their invitation and for organizing this very tiny policy forum on Cyprus and the EU presidency. We will talk about two anniversaries: the 38th anniversary of the invasion and continuing occupation of 37% of the Republic of Cyprus by Turkey, a NATO member and candidate for EU accession, and second, the assumption of the Republic by the Republic of Cyprus of the EU presidency. The Republic of Cyprus attained its independence in 1960. Over the last 52 years, it has become a successful liberal democracy and member of the EU, despite externally instigated political discord back in the late 60s, early 70s, foreign interference, foreign invasion and continuing occupation, and economic dislocation, and continuing plots to dismantle Cyprus as an independent and sovereign state. There is no other precedent in post-World War II Western Europe where this has happened. Despite these problems, the Republic of Cyprus has matured as a democratic state as a result of a changing socio-economic environment, new demographic and employment patterns, economic growth, and the required harmonization for EU accession. The Republic of Cyprus at 52 is an evolving, successful, vibrant liberal democracy. This is evidenced not only by its accession to the EU in 2004, but also by the 2008 presidential elections that elected a president from the oldest Cypriot political party, whose philosophy had marginalized it at critical times in modern Cypriot history. Cyprus joined the EU on 1 May 2004. This was a landmark event in the 9,000-year-long history of Cyprus. It marked the fulfillment of a major objective of successive Cypriot governments. EU membership was a natural choice for Cyprus, which has been part of Europe in terms of history, civilization, culture, economic and political ties. On the 19th of December 1972, Cyprus and the EEC signed an association agreement aiming to establish in 2 stages and over a 10-year period a customs union agreement. This process was interrupted by the 1974 Turkish invasion and the economic and social dislocation caused by the invasion. This is why the second stage of the Cyprus-EEC agreement did not come into force until the 1st of January 1988. The Republic of Cyprus formally applied for EU membership on 20 July 1993. On 15 July 1997, the European Commission, in its Agenda 2000, noted the advanced level of development and economic dynamism of Cyprus and concluded that accession negotiations could start before a political settlement of the Cyprus problem was reached. The Commission also noted that accession negotiations would take place with the government of the Republic of Cyprus, which was the only authority recognized under international law. This was the EU response to Turkey's objections to the accession of Cyprus and to Turkey's demands for separate negotiations between the EU and the secessionist unrecognized regime of occupied Cyprus. In 1998, the government of Cyprus invited the Turkish Cypriots to join the government's negotiating team, but Turkey rejected that offer. Accession talks between the EU and the Republic of Cyprus commenced on the 31st of March 1998 and were successfully concluded in record time in December 2002. Cyprus is the first among the 10 candidate countries to complete its accession talks, thanks to its negotiating readiness and the early harmonization with the acquis communautaire. Cyprus signed the Treaty of Accession to the EU in ceremonies held in Athens on 16 April 2003, and we saw the treaty coming into effect on the 1st of May 2004. I want to stress an important legal point. It was the Republic of Cyprus created in 1960 that was admitted to the EU under its internationally recognized government. The EU recognized the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Cyprus, but in view of the continuing occupation of 37% of the Republic's territory by Turkey A protocol was attached to the accession treaty, suspending the application of the acquis communautaire in occupied Cyprus. The EU indicated its readiness to accommodate the terms of a future settlement with the acquis communautaire, as long as, and I think this is a very crucial statement, quote, it is in line with the principles on which the EU is founded, that is to say, the rule of law, democratic procedures and human rights protected under the European Convention. Let me briefly touch on some aspects of the accession talks between the Republic of Cyprus and the EU. First, the delay in the opening of EU accession talks with Cyprus and the other 9 candidate countries had to do with a philosophical debate within the EU over the widening or the deepening of the organization. This debate involved cultural, political, and economic issues, as well as issues affecting the institutional cohesion and political direction of the EU. Further, 2 prospective members, Cyprus and Malta, were Mediterranean mini-states, while Germany at first favored only an East European expansion for the EU. The eventual compromise went both east and south. Second, another problem was specific to Cyprus. Could a divided Cyprus enter the EU? What would the effect be of EU accession talks on the UN-sponsored talks for a comprehensive solution of the Cyprus problem? Countries like the United States, Britain, and Turkey saw this as an opportunity to impose a settlement of the Cyprus problem as a precondition for accession. This was rejected by the EU because it granted Turkey, a non-EU member, a veto power over EU enlargement. Ironically, Germany, until the end of the Cold War, was a divided country member of the EU. Third, Anglo-American diplomacy under David Honey and the late Richard Holbrooke also attempted to link the Cypriot accession case to that of Turkey. The EU, again, rejected any such linkage between the 2 applications. Each application would be examined on its own merits. 4. Over the last year, it has become fashionable to talk about the cooperation between Cyprus and Israel following the deterioration of Israel's relations with Turkey and the discovery of hydrocarbon resources in the exclusive economic zones of Israel and Cyprus. One little-known element is the role of Israel's Shimon Peres, the role he played in the Cypriot EU accession. In his official visit to Bonn in 1995, in his private meeting with Chancellor Kohl, Shimon Peres supported the accession of Cyprus to the EU and urged the German Chancellor not to delay the accession of Cyprus to the EU because of the unresolved Cyprus problem. In Shimon Peres's words, and I quote, "Cyprus was the EU anchor in the Eastern Mediterranean." And fifth, the role played by Greece in facilitating the accession of Cyprus to the EU. Greece took 3 important steps. One was the lifting of the veto of Turkey's EU financial protocol in 1995. The second was the agreement in 1999 that Turkey could become a candidate for EU accession, but with a roadmap of obligations that included the resolution of Greco-Turkish issues and the Cyprus problem. Of course, nothing has happened since then. The third important Greek decision was the clear message sent to all EU members that the next EU widening would not occur without the Republic of Cyprus. In December 1999, at the Helsinki EU summit, the EU unanimously agreed that Cyprus would become an EU member, even in the absence of a political settlement. The Anglo-American and Turkish attempt to link the Cypriot accession to the resolution of the Cyprus problem and to Turkey's application simply failed. Now, Turkey's supporters are trying to upgrade the status of occupied Cyprus with proposals calling for an end to the so-called Turkish Cypriot isolation and for opening direct trade with occupied Cyprus in a manner providing basically the de facto recognition to the illegal political entity in occupied Cyprus. Many of these proposals overlook the issue of who created the so-called Turkish Cypriot isolation and the measures taken by the government of Cyprus on behalf of the legitimate Turkish Cypriot population following the partial opening of the ceasefire line by the Turkish occupation army in April 2003. While Cyprus concurred with the other 26 EU members in September 2005 that accession talks between Turkey and the EU could begin, Turkey has yet to comply with the conditions of the additional protocol for these talks. These conditions included the opening of Turkish ports and airports to ships and commercial aircraft from Cyprus. Nor has Turkey recognized the Republic of Cyprus, but expects Cyprus not to raise any obstacles to Turkey's EU accession. Turkey has even gone a step further. It has threatened the Republic of Cyprus militarily, especially since the discovery of hydrocarbon resources in the Cypriot exclusive economic zone. Turkey refuses to recognize the rights of Cyprus under international law, while violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Cyprus by undertaking illegal exploration activities for gas and oil in occupied Cyprus and in the waters of occupied Cyprus. I should stress that the three Law of the Sea treaties are part of EU law. Turkey, as an EU candidate country, refuses to ratify these treaties. On the contrary, Turkey and her supporters have already laid claim to future revenues from Cypriot hydrocarbon resources. They demand that Turkish Cypriots receive their share of these resources and claim that such action will facilitate the Cyprus settlement. That's back to the old story, give us something in advance, we'll solve the Cyprus problem later. We know the story, that's the Salamization of the Cyprus problem. Anyway, natural resources belong to the Republic of Cyprus, not to each of the major communities on a percentage basis. Revenues from natural resources will be allocated through the budgetary process to address social, economic, and developmental objectives that will benefit all the legitimate population of Cyprus after a comprehensive settlement has been reached, and not while Cyprus is under Turkish occupation. Turkey and its puppet regime in occupied Cyprus, and many of its supporters, including things that Philip Gordon said the other day about the natural resources of Cyprus, will do well to realize the futility, let alone the irony, of these proposals. The latest twist in Turkey's conduct vis-à-vis the EU and Cyprus is her refusal to participate as a candidate country in EU meetings during the Cypriot presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, Turkey's conduct toward the EU and its members is simply unprecedented. There has not been another similar case in the history of the EU. Turkey and her supporters, particularly Britain, have tried to place the blame on Cyprus for the lack of progress in Turkey's accession case. This is another myth used to rationalize Turkey's multiple harmonization problems with the acquis and various domestic problems facing today's Turkey. Let me close with some very brief comments on the unresolved Cyprus problem 38 years after the Turkish invasion. The latest UN-sponsored resolution effort has run its course because the only solution acceptable to Turkey appears to be a resurrected version of the Annan Plan, which is intended to disband the Republic of Cyprus and replace it by a confederation of two largely autonomous states in the island, legitimizing, of course, the outcome of the Turkish invasion. The proposals generated by Ban Ki-moon and Alexander Downer completely disregarded the outcome of the 2004 free and democratic referendum on the Annan Plan, while promoting a dysfunctional solution that violates European law and the European Convention on Human Rights. Downer and Ban Ki-moon, much like their predecessor, Kofi Annan, attempted but failed to disband a 52-year-old country in order to appease Turkey. Ladies and gentlemen, no self-respecting country in the year 2012 would ever accept a proposal similar to the rejected Annan Plan just to placate Turkey and its supporters. The accession of the Republic of Cyprus to the EU offers a unique opportunity for the resolution of the Cyprus problem, based on the principles on which the EU is founded on, that is democracy, the rule of law, and the protection of human rights under the European Convention. Cyprus, as a sovereign and equal member of the EU, will not accept anything less for its legitimate citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. De Lucia.
Mr. Ambassador, Mr. President, thank you very much for the invitation to address this meeting of the American Hellenic Institute. It's a pleasure to be with you. And so again, it's a pleasure to be with you today to celebrate the beginning of the Cyprus presidency of the European Union. For quite some time, the 6 monthly rotating presidencies have been an instrument for providing a renewed impetus in the pursuit of European Union objectives. It has also helped cater for the diversity of sensitivities and priorities of the various member states and bring them together into the European project. But at some stage, it was considered that being 27 made this somewhat discontinuous process. And it was necessary to reconcile the advantages of this new impetus, this new blood, this new energy that each presidency brought to the European project, with also some continuity and time consistency between in the steering of the European Union. Hence, the Treaty of Lisbon, while it kept the rotating presidency for the internal policies of the EU, it also created the role of President of the European Council, that with the role of steering the priorities and the policies of the Union for a longer period than 6 months, for 2.5 years. It also created a High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, under which the foreign affairs issues were entrusted, and the creation of the European External Action Service, which is the embryo of a pan-European foreign service. As a consequence of that, outside the Union, the EU, the European Union, is no longer represented by the country, the embassy that holds the EU presidency, but rather by the delegation of the European Union, of which I have the honor to represent today. So it is a permanent remit that is given to the EU delegation to represent the EU on a continuous basis, rather than a 6-monthly change from one embassy to the other. And it also entrusts with the delegation the role of coordinating the member states vis-à-vis the action in the host country. Let me say that the that for countries taking on the presidency is a challenge. It's a challenge that many remember as a really high workload and somewhat demanding or very demanding 6 months. And this memory stays still for quite a few years if you listen to the representatives of the countries that have, especially recently, held those responsibilities. So it's a very hard workload that makes both the government and the administration be stretched. And this is even more so for a small-sized administration, like the case of Cyprus. It is still harder for a country that takes this responsibility for the first time. And it's even much more serious challenge. It's a very serious challenge to do that in the current context. But it's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity. It's a big opportunity to really test the country and to bring all the assets and to show the rest of the EU and the world the capacity of the country to really rise up to the challenges. So it's a challenge, but it's also a big opportunity. And let me, in the remainder of my words, focus on precisely one of the elements that makes this task a challenge and also an opportunity. That's the context of the European sovereign debt crisis. So the context in which Cyprus takes on the presidency is that of a perfect storm. It's a combination of several storms that happen all together, and storms that were brewing for some time, but that could have probably been solved one by one. But when coming all together, it makes the problem really very dark. So we have a financial and fiscal crisis that originated in the US, but of which many elements were already also in the EU. Poor regulation, poor supervision, private over-indebtedness. Also on the fiscal side, there were unsustainable budgets. This is not only a European problem. There was also poor enforcement of fiscal rules. So that's a fiscal and financial stability aspect. There was also a competitiveness problem, a growth problem. And there were, in many of our economies, market rigidities. The single market, which is one of our flagship achievements, is still not complete. There is insufficient investment, therefore is insufficient growth. On top of that, we recognize that the institutional framework was incomplete. So, for instance, we didn't have a euro area crisis mechanism. We had a single market, so the banks and other financial institutions could operate all across Europe, but there was no single supervisory institution to take care of these interactions and these institutions that operated beyond borders. There was no common deposit guarantee scheme. There were national guarantee schemes, but not common deposit guarantee schemes. There was no unique or single resolution mechanism. On top of that, the fiscal union had many elements, but it was not complete either. So these were the determinants of the problem. So how did the EU react? It reacted to the crisis by tackling those same three axes: the restoring growth, restoring stability, both financial and fiscal, and advancing integration. And the various measures that have been taken so far go along at least one of those three axes. Let me be more specific. Much has already been done in all these areas. For instance, we have enhanced the macro and fiscal surveillance. We have enhanced both the rules and enforcement of the rules to take account of the crisis, to take account of the fact that it was too much focus on fiscal issues, but we have seen that fiscal were only part of the problem, and that issues like credit growth or the importance of debt or current account imbalances were at least as important. So we have expanded the scope of the surveillance, and we have tightened also the enforcement. We have also acted with assistance packages for the countries in distress. That is a combination of growth and stability, and it was also growth since the beginning, even if much of the press has focused only on the austerity aspects. It also addressed the correction of some of the loopholes that were in the financial regulation, according to the G20 agreements. It also addressed the issues of financial fiscal stability, but at the same time integration, by having the ECB going beyond what it had always been doing and providing extraordinary liquidity so as to cope with the problem of markets having seized. There was also a proposal of the Fiscal Compact Treaty to again enshrine in the national legislation and where possible in national constitutions the principle of a balanced budget rule. And it created new instruments, the firewalls, to cope with the crisis when and if those crises occur. Moreover, very recently, as you know, late in June, there was the agreement in principle to create a banking supervision and as the first step towards the banking union. Moreover, this came along the agreement on a growth compact that would be a combination, would further the EU both in terms of growth and integration, and that would provide the counterpart and the complement to the fiscal discipline that is necessary to overcome the crisis. So, but true, much has been done, but much still is on the table, and this is now in the hands of the Cypriot presidency to steer that and to push forward towards the agreements on the various measures that will lead to a solution. For instance, there is a proposal on the table to still enhance surveillance in order to take account of the lessons that we have drawn from the programs, from the assistance programs that have been effected for the countries in distress. This has shown that, for instance, in terms of the provision of information from the authorities to the European Commission and to the other members, it is important to go further. It is important also to coordinate the budgets, for instance, ahead of the approval by parliaments and the governments. There is also the completion of the financial regulation. A lot has been done, but there are still some of these measures and legislative measures that are still on the table and that need to be steered towards a successful conclusion. There is still the completion and the implementation of the agreement in principle of the single supervisor. There are also the other elements towards a banking union, the bank recovery and resolution mechanism, the deposit guarantee scheme, of which proposals were already made by the European Commission and are currently under discussion in the Council and Parliament. So conclusion to these issues will have to come in the next few months. And this is a combination of improvement in terms of financial and fiscal stability and also integration. So more integration in order to have more stability in order to have a smoother integration. We also realized that we will have to go also further in terms of integration and growth by pushing forward the other measures to complete the single market. And we will also have to complete, hopefully in these 6 months, the medium-term expenditure framework for the next 7 years, for which the European Commission has made a proposal, and that will have to be discussed in the next few months again under the Cypriot presidency. And this is important because the objective is to put the European budget still more clearly to the service of European growth by promoting investment, by promoting tackling unemployment, by promoting the improvement of workers' skills, by promoting the access of small businesses to financial institutions, to finance. So this is important, and also the adjustment of the EU transfers mechanisms in order to make this integration and this growth much more effective. So this is part of what the Cypriot presidency has on the table. So this is part of the serious challenges that the Cypriot presidency has for the next 6 months. It is really a very serious challenge, but as I said, it's a big opportunity. We know that there are other issues like neighboring countries and energy and other issues, but I wanted to focus on this part that may bring to the EU a solution to the crisis, or at least advance very seriously towards the solution of the problems that underlie the EU sovereign crisis, and therefore put Europe back on the right track towards a much more sustainable growth, a much more stable growth, and a role of Cyprus, of the EU in the world that we want, and that the US and the international community deserves and can expect from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Delacia. And now, Bill Lovelace.
It's always dangerous when you have journalists near anything electronic, other than a keyboard. Thank you very much. Right here. Well, Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity to meet with you today. I'm sort of a Johnny-come-lately on things Cyprus, and especially things having to do with energy in Cyprus and the South Mediterranean. But, you know, I had the great opportunity recently to interview the Cypriot Foreign Minister, Ratu Kozikumakulis, on the program, and I learned a lot. And one thing that absolutely stunned me in our discussion there was the potential. I had heard about the potential of the South Mediterranean, but I really hadn't seen it quantified in numbers or anything like that. And she simply cited some numbers from the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey. She reminded me, or she told me actually, that you know, according to USGS, the Eastern Mediterranean might hold as much as 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 8 billion barrels of oil. That's a lot of hydrocarbons, and it truly puts the region in a position where it can compete with some of the other large basins and regions around the world that have tremendous potential, much of it untapped. So it's really, truly a wake-up call for me. So there is a big energy story brewing in the South Mediterranean, and one that I believe is overlooked, but should begin to attract increasing attention. And the timing becomes that much more important to Cyprus now, for the reasons that have been cited by our other panelists here, in its role now as head of the EU presidency for the next 6 months. It seems to me it provides tremendous opportunity to cast a spotlight on this energy potential that the region has. It's an enormous potential for both oil and gas off the coasts of Cyprus, Israel, Lebanon, and Egypt. And it's oil and gas that can contribute not only to the energy security of these nations, but also to secure supplies for Europe. As I say, I thought about this, and it really did strike me as the nation bursting onto the energy scene. It was back in 2011 when Noble Energy, a Houston-based exploration company, discovered some oil and gas off the nation. Noble estimates the well that they tapped there, that they drilled, could produce up to 8 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Noble's success prompted major interest in Cyprus's offshore region. And in May, 15 companies submitted bids for licenses to develop 9 blocks offshore Cyprus in its exclusive economic zone. A government panel, as I understand it, is due to announce awards by the end of the year, and drilling there is expected to begin in 2 to 3 years. You know, in the meantime, Nicosia is moving forward rather aggressively to build, to consider what to do, how to get this gas out of this region, and is looking at building a liquefied natural gas plant on its southern coast. I rely a lot here. I'm obviously a Washington guy. You know, I've spent 30 years reporting on energy in Washington, but I'm part of a team that covers energy around the world, and we cover the EU and Cyprus very closely. And much of what I'm relaying here is information that I rely upon my colleagues, our reporters in our London bureau, to pass on. But you know, they're looking. Cyprus will look at this potential for LNG exports. The timetable for the project is unclear. But you know, Cypriot energy sources have told us that they're predicted it would not be completed and operating until 2018 at the earliest. Naturally, financing is a major issue. Cypriot officials reportedly say there has been substantial interest from foreign institutions, and the government has met with several leading European banks on financing this proposed project. Let me toss up a map there that will show. It's sort of small on the screen, but you can get a sense of the economic zone off Cyprus, and in that region of the Mediterranean. You can see the blocks. The Noble block is number 12 in dock there, the one they drilled in 2011. And you can see some of the remaining blocks, 9 of which were bid on in May. You can also see the zones, the economic zones for Israel, Lebanon there as well, including that region in Israel where there's also been gas finds and where they expect production to begin within a couple of years. Until that operation, that project, these various projects offshore Cyprus are operating, the nation hopes to receive gas via a pipeline for its own domestic use. And as I realize now, the need for that is rather crucial. The country relies, as you probably know, on oil for its electricity generation. It lost a plant, one of 3 plants, I believe, in the nation last year because of an explosion. And it pays rather high rates right now for electricity, which is an important factor, obviously, for economic development. And so the bringing gas onshore would be quite a significant achievement, and it's something that we understand the nation hopes to begin doing by 2015 or 2016. There have also been talks of Cyprus joining forces with Israel to build a joint LNG export facility. Cypriot officials were to hold talks with Israeli officials on the possibility of such collaboration. I wish I could report more on that. I did call back to our bureau to see if we had anything more, but I understand that some of those talks were planned. There has been cooperation between Israel and Cyprus on offshore oil and gas development and on energy generally, and one might look at, certainly we as reporters would look for increased collaboration along those lines. Cyprus, of course, hopes to work with all countries in that region of the Mediterranean, including Turkey, to develop the region's gas resources. Cyprus has signed agreements with Israel, Lebanon, and Egypt governing gas exploration in the region. But as you know better than I do, and as has been discussed here so far today, you know, the tensions between Cyprus and Turkey continue. We saw this with the development of the natural gas resources in the past year. Since Noble's discovery last year. At the end of April, there was further escalation when Turkey's state-owned oil and gas company began drilling in Turkish-held North Cyprus, as was discussed previously. In April, Turkey warned that companies bidding in the latest licensing round for the blocks off Cyprus faced reprisals and urged them to pull out of the competition. Now, those warnings don't appear to have had much impact so far, given the 15 bids made by companies, and this included companies such as France's Total, Malaysia's Petronas, Russia's Gazprom, Italy's Eni, and the US-based Marathon Oil. But the threat of reprisals perhaps could be of significance to some of these companies, and it's something we've watched. Total, for example, operates one of the biggest oil and distribution chains in Turkey, Eni, which has partnered with a Turkish company to build an oil pipeline across Turkey. And Gazprom, meanwhile, is Turkey's biggest supplier of natural gas. Still, the development of gas resources off Cyprus will obviously continue. And the prospect of supplies from Israel and other countries in the region suggests that there'll be, all of these countries will be looking for markets to sell their gas. So the question is, where does this gas go? Well, Europe is the prime candidate, of course, and certainly in Cyprus's eyes. And in June, we noted that the Commerce and Energy Minister said, quote, "Our aim is to export the gas to Europe, providing a third corridor of supply to the continent." But there's questions too when you look at Europe in terms of gas. There's a lot of competition to supply gas to Europe. There's also some question about the demand for natural gas, especially with economic circumstances throughout much of the continent. Europe's demand for natural gas declined in 2011, and prospects for growth of energy demand on the continent are still uncertain. Moreover, while Cypriot gas would be very welcome in Greece now, we wonder if that would last long as Gazprom presses on with South Stream and the Shah Deniz developers get closer to finalizing a pipeline for a route for natural gas delivery that would provide quite stiff competition. The region may be very well supplied with gas by the time supplies for Cyprus become available. South Stream, as you may know, is a proposed pipeline that would transport Russian natural gas through the Black Sea to Bulgaria and further to Greece, Italy, and Austria. Shah Deniz is the largest gas field in Azerbaijan. Its developers would bring gas into Europe without having to cross countries like Russia or Iran. So this competition in Europe could make Asia, with its burgeoning demand for LNG, an attractive option for Cyprus, and likely that we assume will also become an inviting target at some point. There's tremendous demand for LNG in Japan, for example, right now, particularly as the nuclear plants, most of the nuclear plants have been offline since last year's tsunami, and a lot of uncertainty in that country over its generation of electricity going forward. China too, and most of Asia its thirst for LNG will only grow in the time ahead. So the challenge for Cyprus is not just keeping its neighbors happy, but also finding a way to make the gas project commercially viable as soon as possible so the nation can generate the income it needs. So we get to the EU presidency. I'm no student of the EU presidency. Again, I'm a creature of Washington and a student of Congress and the executive branch here, but I've learned through my colleagues abroad the importance of understanding the mechanisms that are taking place on the other continents when it comes to energy. And Cyprus's role with the presidency of the EU for the next 6 months would appear to give it an opportunity to promote its prospects as a secure gas supplier to Europe. And even as markets for its gas are still a little bit, may appear to be a little bit fuzzy right now, it seems as though Cyprus does have an important card it can play right now to really attract attention to itself as truly having an enormous resource, one that it can develop well, and in conjunction potentially with other nations in that region of the Mediterranean. One topic that Cyprus apparently plans to focus on in its presidency when it comes to energy is offshore oil and gas safety. Since the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the U.S. last year and the Gulf of Mexico, that's become an important topic. And it's certainly a timely one for Cyprus to show leadership on, now that it too has become a player offshore in natural gas and development. Though, as I understand it, that may be a tall order. Even that one subject may be somewhat of a tall order for Cyprus, given what I understand are some disagreements over offshore oil regulation among the 27 nations of the EU. We reported, for example, that the UK has been consistently critical of European Council proposals for offshore safety regimes, saying they would conflict with what London considers to be its own world-class oil and gas safety regime. Emissions trading and nuclear safety perhaps come up as topics too, although again in our own reporting we see perhaps emissions trading as not being an issue where much more will be done in the near term. Perhaps nuclear safety gets some discussion, but neither seem to be as have the impact and the potential for progress as oil and gas, particularly natural gas supply. So in summary, this appears to be a critical time for Cyprus and its future in terms of its energy, economic, and political security. The EU presidency offers the island nation a brief opportunity to sharply spotlight its energy potential. But more importantly, coming months and years will determine whether Cyprus and its neighbors in North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe can harness and mutually benefit from the vast energy potential lying beneath the Mediterranean. Again, potential that many of us, and certainly people like me, didn't realize was so great in its depth and potential. The Economist magazine summed up the situation well in an article the other day, and I'll quote. It said, "Gas is changing the geopolitics of the region. If things go well, the Eastern Mediterranean might be a smaller North Sea, a safe source of energy for Europe. If they do not, it could become a zone of instability on Europe's borders." The article concludes with the admonition, quote, "It's time for Europe to wake up and smell this gas." Thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Bill Loveless. And finally, Ambassador Kurt Volker.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Hi, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to speak here today. The task that I've been given is to try to put some of what we now heard into a bit of a strategic context. And the first thing I'd just like to say at the outset, as Cyprus takes over the EU presidency, is that the EU is still tremendously, tremendously important. It's easy in Washington, as people point at the euro crisis or the fiscal crises or the lack of decision-making or the convincing decision-making, to think about writing off Europe, to think about writing off the EU, to talk more about Asia, to think that that's the future. Now let me just give a first emphasis to saying Europe really matters. It's the biggest single economic bloc in the world. It is the biggest trading partner for the United States when you take the EU as a whole. It is the biggest source of mutual cross-investment. It's a tremendous source of jobs in both the United States and Europe with the cross-investment that takes place. And what happens in Europe is going to tremendously affect what happens in the United States. But there's another dimension to which Europe is terribly important. Along with the United States, it is the principal contributor to problem solving in the world, whether that is through development assistance or troop contributions in UN or other military operations, through its political clout and diplomacy, through seats on the UN Security Council that the UK and France have. It is tremendously important across the board in dealing with the challenges that we have. So as Cyprus rises to the EU presidency for this 6-month period, it is a helm of an organization that is still tremendously important to the challenges that we're facing in the world. So let me just say a few words about what are the challenges that we're facing. What are the problems that the EU is having itself and in dealing with some of these challenges? What are some of the challenges of being an EU presidency country these days? And Antonio mentioned some of these. And what are some of the special challenges that Cyprus is going to face? And how can we look ahead over the next 6 months and beyond to this Cypriot EU presidency? Well, first, just to talk a little bit about the challenges in the world that matter and that the EU is dealing with and needs to deal with. First and foremost among those are the fiscal and financial challenges and the euro challenges inside Europe itself. Clearly, Cyprus is not going to have a leading voice within the EU on shaping the debt structuring, the financial bailouts, the resolution of the euro crisis, and clearly these things are going to continue to boil during the Cypriot EU presidency. In fact, over the next month or so, Greece is going to be in a position of having to make a payment on some of its debt servicing. It appears at this point it's going to be difficult to do that without a further financial infusion from the EU. But it appears also likely that Greece, under the new government, will not yet have put in place the reforms required under the agreements with the EU for the bailout. So we're going to be going through that sort of management of this crisis and management of this issue continuously through the Cypriot EU presidency. The challenge for a country like Cyprus, when it's going to be the big countries, France, Germany, the European Central Bank itself, that will be shaping the terms of these arrangements, the challenge for Cyprus is to try to provide a, veneer is the wrong word, but a surface of leadership over what is going to be a very messy, difficult, long, drawn-out process. In fact, European members themselves talk about constructive crises because you need the crisis in order to drive the reforms. Keeping that together and keeping a good external face for the EU is going to be a real challenge for Cyprus. Those are the internal challenges for the EU. They are compounded by the difficulties in implementing the new arrangements of the Lisbon Treaty under these circumstances. The Lisbon Treaty was introduced with great hope and optimism about streamlining decision-making, creating a more cohesive, effective, and coherent European Union. But it came into effect just at the time that Europe was also being buffeted by this financial and fiscal crisis, when those decision-making arrangements were not going to be the ones that were going to drive the resolution of these crises. And it has made, in fact, the operation of the EU under the Lisbon Treaty more difficult and providing less of that cohesive single actor than we would have hoped based on the intentions of the Lisbon Treaty. That has created a challenge for every EU presidency country that has served in that role since the Lisbon Treaty came into effect. It's not going to be any different for Cyprus. It's going to be very challenging to manage that, and yet the EU does need to have this strong, coherent external face. Beyond Europe itself, when you look at the world, we are facing a time of severe challenges and crises. The most important one at the moment, the most acute one, is the conflict going on in Syria. Cyprus is the closest EU member country to Syria. If there's going to be any kind of military intervention in Syria to remove Assad from power, this will require cooperation with Turkey. Working together as the EU and Turkey with a Cypriot EU presidency can be especially challenging, given Turkish attitudes toward Cyprus and the lack of resolution to the division of the island. This promises to put the EU in a very difficult position if we're in a situation of needing to work with Turkey on Syria. That's true also if Assad goes on his own merits and there's a need for some support to a new regime, to stabilizing Syria after the departure of the Assad regime. Cyprus is also the closest EU member state to Lebanon. And in the past, in the wars in Lebanon, we've seen the value of Cypriot geography to dealing with the conflict in Lebanon, both from a humanitarian perspective and from a security perspective. And given the conflict in Syria, it is not out of the question to see spillover conflict into Lebanon as well. And again, this puts Cyprus in a very unique position as both a country in that region as well as presidency country of the European Union. Those aren't the only challenges either, because beyond the region and beyond the European Union, you have the broader issues of security, counterterrorism, Islamization, conflict going on right now in Mali, consequences of withdrawals from Afghanistan as they begin to take place, and we lose the surge forces there that have been able to take the initiative in Afghanistan. I think we're going to be entering a period of greater risk in Afghanistan. We see a slowing global economy. We talked about slowdown in Asia, which again can have an impact back on Europe and the United States. So these are the challenges that the European Union needs to be dealing with over the next 6 months and a year and beyond. And it's going to be in Cypriot hands to provide some measure of leadership to the European Union, even when it doesn't have all the levers of leadership as the presidency country, as they rest with the permanent institutions. I mentioned already some of the challenges that other EU presidency countries have faced in its implementation of the Lisbon Treaty. It is difficult to exercise the leadership that had been the case under the new arrangements. And just as an aside, so you'll have seen in my bio that I was U.S. ambassador to NATO. But prior to that, I was the #2 for European Affairs in the State Department and had U.S.-EU relations as part of my portfolio then, and went through about 3 years of U.S.-EU summits and planning and trying to find ways to work together with the European Union on specific issues. Very familiar with what the role of the presidency was then, and I have to say it wasn't easy. It was very difficult to try to build U.S.-EU cooperation at that time. I think it's gotten harder. And I think it has not gone as well in the last few years, even as it did then, and that wasn't good enough. So I see this as a real challenge that has faced every EU presidency country recently. But then you come to the special challenges for Cyprus, which are themselves significant. And I mentioned already the potential for needing to work together as the EU with Turkey, which could very well be a major issue during the Cypriot EU presidency. You deal also with the size issues. You've got France, Germany, European Central Bank, and others that are going to be dominating the discussion about some of these most important issues. And it's going to be very difficult for Cyprus to play a leading role in that context. It's not one of the major EU countries itself, but a much smaller one, with smaller means. The energy issues that we just heard about are tremendously important, and ones where Cyprus has great potential. But again, as was indicated in the very end of your remarks, there's also the potential for instability or conflict arising from this. And that's also something that Cyprus will have a special challenge in managing, given the relationships in the region, whether it is these conflicts in Syria and Lebanon or the relationship with Turkey. And then finally, I just want to say one word about Russia. Russia has offered to provide financial assistance to Cyprus in helping it manage some of the budget issues that it faces, debt issues. But Russia's interest in this is not benign, of course. Russia has its own interests, and I would link them very closely to Cyprus's energy sector. And the EU has had a very difficult time managing the relationship with Russia on energy issues up to this point. We've seen Gazprom or others act in aggressive, if not monopolistic fashion. We've seen the EU as a commission push back on this, saying you can't have the vertical integration of industries. You have member states that have differing views over how to deal with Russia, from extremely accommodationist to very, very wary about the implications. And Russia has tried to use these tools at its disposal to maximize its competitive advantages, to exercise political and strategic influence, and to divide the EU. And this is, again, something where, with the energy issues that we're hearing about in Cyprus, as well as the acute financial issues that can come up, it also becomes a special issue for trying to manage their relationship with Russia during this time. So that's some of the strategic context that I wanted to bring up and talk about some of the issues that Cyprus is going to have to face over the next several months, and the EU is going to have to face during the next several months, and I'd be delighted to explore them further in the question and answer time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. So we should move now to some questions, and I thought I'd start us off a little bit. I think it was Professor Koufidakis who first mentioned that Turkey has proclaimed that it won't work with Cyprus as EU president. This seems to me the most proximate possible cause of notoriety, tension, whatever, in Cyprus's 6 months. Now, Turkey is not currently actively engaged in negotiations for joining the EU, but my understanding is that there are dozens, maybe hundreds of small issues, small meetings, small day-to-day business that needs to be done between the EU and Turkey. And it seems to me that this presents both a challenge and maybe an opportunity for Cyprus in its role as president of the EU, perhaps requiring a certain kind of restraint and seeing how Turkey copes with this self-inflicted, in a sense, limit on its ability to work with the EU. And I thought I'd just throw that out to the panel as a first question. Is that the case? Is my read correct?
I'm happy to start off. I'm sure others will have views. A couple of thoughts on that. I think that is basically a correct analysis. I would add to it that Turkey feels very confident right now. That Turkey's economy is booming. It has had very stable politics under Erdogan. He has been able to strengthen the hold of his party on power and diminish the role of the military. They've been going through a very successful period of time, giving them a high degree of self-confidence, if not overconfidence. Several years ago, I think the feeling was that it would benefit Turkey to be a member of the EU, and the EU would be having to figure out how to navigate very difficult issues of Turkey being a member of the EU. I think that dynamic has flipped. I think Turkey is quite happy being outside the EU. It feels it's very successful outside the EU, is not driving itself toward the EU anymore, not so worried about this. And meanwhile, the European health of the economy and the dynamism and strength that Europe had shown 10 years ago now appears very different with the euro crisis and the debt crises. And so the tables have turned a bit in terms of perceptions. Second item I would add to that is the divisions over Cyprus. That is a vital national interest for Cyprus. It's not negotiable. Likewise, the Turks will treat it as a vital national interest. So I don't see this as an opportunity. I don't see making Turkey-EU cooperation as a point of leverage in order to try to drive progress on the dispute. I think actually it works the other way around. The dispute is more important to both sides than Turkey-EU cooperation is. So I would argue that the better strategy is to try to separate the resolution of that dispute from the ability of the EU as a whole and Turkey to work together given the challenges that we have in the world. And here, just a final point, I think that the evolution of the institutions of the EU under the Lisbon Treaty give the EU more options than just a bilateral discussion between the Cypriot EU presidency and Turkey. And I hope that both the EU as a whole and Turkey are creative enough to use those without prejudicing the position of Cyprus or Turkey.
Well, the only thing that I'm going to add is that we do have a very arrogant Turkish policy. And, you know, most people keep talking about the miracles that taken place in Turkey under Erdogan. There's no question that a lot of things, positive things have happened. Turkey is riding a bubble right now. And the bubble is going to blow up in a few years because there are a lot of internal, structural, political, and economic weaknesses that most people are unwilling to address. Turkey has found new horizons, again, because of the Islamic orientations of Prime Minister Erdogan and the governing party. Let's not forget that. So, blaming only the EU that it has not fulfilled and satisfied Turkish demands, be they in Cyprus or in an integration without conditions that make Turkey a member of the EU that lives up to EU standards. That's a real challenge, but at the same time we have to face the broader challenge facing us today with Turkey as a potential, as a prospective member that is flirting with just about anyone and everyone, and now the latest twist in the Islamization of the Middle East. So I don't think Cyprus can do much to resolve the ambitions that Turkey has. Turkey is not willing to sit down and live by the certain legal, political, and social standards that the EU has. Turkey has not complied with the European Convention on Human Rights, and on and on and on, the law of the sea treaties and on. The EU also has a responsibility in all this. You cannot simply put under the rug all these problems and say, well, they'll go away and someday Turkey is going to be a better country. the EU itself has to have the political guts to stand up for what it believes its standards happen to be today.
Antonio, I don't know if you can address this question. As the ambassador said, that post Lisbon, the EU has other ways of engaging with Turkey outside of the presidency. Do you see problems arising because of Turkey's concerns with engaging with the Cyprus government as it's administers this post for the next 6 months? Are there ways of avoiding those tensions? You're the expert on the operations of the EU. How do you see it?
Thank you. Two issues. One on the interest by Turkey in Europe.
To the microphone.
Sorry.
Sorry.
On the issue of the interest of Turkey in joining the joining the European Union. I still remember when Turkey was granted the status of a candidate country in '99. They already claimed that all the reforms that were on the list, on the homework that the EU had listed for the to overcome before accession. The reaction by the government was, well, we will be doing that for our own, in our own interest. It's not because we want to join the EU, it's because it's good for us. And we said, fine, we agree. But this doesn't mean, so this kind of ambivalence or presumed ambivalence of Turkey vis-à-vis the EU dates back a long time. So it's, I think it's a natural negotiating stance, and it must be taken in this sense. Now, the fact that since 1999, Turkey has gained some self-confidence, and it has been economically it has increased prosperity, and also geopolitically it has gained some importance. Yes, fine, but you must look at the economy on a much longer perspective, and the current situation of the EU with low growth and Turkey with high growth. Okay, there are many tensions in the Greek economy, in the Greek society, and we have had these tensions in the EU. We will have them for a while, and we will be overcome. So the issue of accession and the relative weight, the relative negotiating position of each part, of each side, must be taken in a much longer term context, and this is also this much longer term perspective is I think what must prevail in addressing the tensions during the Cypriot presidency. It's clear that there will be tensions. It is clear that the EU is not going to compromise its principles, its rules, and its institutions because of the exigencies of a candidate country. And it's true that we have some history of trying to face new challenges, and there are other channels through civil society, through more informal ways of discussing that can be put to use in order for this tension not to cast shadow on and not to hinder too much in addressing the very serious challenges that we have listed, that Arthur Volker has also mentioned. So it is in our interest to really go beyond, not forget these tensions, not forget our principles, but try to work to have our side farther than this problem that I understand is very sensitive for Cyprus, rightly so. But we cannot be blurred by this problem so that it hinders addressing the other also very, very sensitive.
Thank you. I want to move to another issue that was raised, but I am still, maybe like the audience, a little unclear on. And that is this, the relationship, the changed, growing, deepening relationship between Cyprus and Israel, especially as it pertains to the gas, to the hydrocarbons, but also militarily. My understanding is that Cyprus has allowed some exercises to be taken over Cyprus airspace by Israeli jets. There's discussions of that with Greece. Obviously, there's been an erosion of the relationship between Turkey and Israel. All this is very well known. So but I'm still unclear about a couple of things, and the thing that I'm really unclear about is what is the relationship between Israel and Cyprus? How is it evolving on the gas? Are there going to be joint ventures? I've heard, yes, I've heard from other sources that will never be the case. Is Israel going to be investing in liquefied natural gas facilities on Cyprus? What does that mean geostrategically? These are just really reporters' questions. And feel we have some great experts here, and we ought to clarify these things. So maybe Bill, your reporters have informed you in ways that I don't know about?
Yeah, I think you raise all good questions, and I think from what I've seen of the reporting on the region and all those are the questions that are, for the most part, are still outstanding. I was struck when I spoke with the foreign minister a couple of months ago about her comments on the deep relationship on energy between Israel and Cyprus and the potential for collaboration. Noble, of course, is operating in Israel as well as in Cyprus, and the finds, the regions they're exploring in the two countries' economic zones are relatively close. So there's a lot of information being shared there. I think the question is the extent to which they will engage in, the two nations will engage in some financial arrangements. I think the LNG issue is perhaps the one we've been watching most closely to see where an LNG facility would be located. Would it be located initially in Cyprus and used by Israel, or vice versa? From a market standpoint, it seems as though it could go either way and work quite well, but I guess there's a lot of political considerations there that I'm not so familiar with in terms of how it's affecting talks and negotiations between the two countries. I think the ongoing talks, assuming they're still ongoing between the two nations on LNG, for example, will be illustrative of what might be the potential. And then I guess I would look, again, as a reporter, I would probably look too to see how the situation in Egypt might affect, Cyprus's relations with that nation, again, given the proximity of the gas resources offshore for each of those nations. Israel's, reliance to some extent until recently on natural gas from Egypt. Israel's increasing and optimistic outlook for its own gas fields offshore and what that might mean for its energy security. It seems as though all of these things play and have some bearing on how a market develops, infrastructure develops in that region.
Great, thank you. I want to go to the floor now. What I'd like to do is have whoever is asking the question come to the microphone here in the center and state your name clearly. Yes, this lady right here.
My name is Irina Bereska. I am a correspondent for Macedonian television here in Washington, D.C. I have a question for the representative of the delegation. So I'm sorry that the Cyprus ambassador is not here. I'm sorry, you are. Okay. Okay, can you ask, I'll ask you then. Okay, first I want to congratulate Cyprus for the presidency of the European Union. So when Cyprus has presented the priorities of the European Union presidency, they mentioned that one of the enlargement is their priority. But you, when you said about the countries, you left off Macedonia from the list of candidate states. How do you comment this? And also for the delegation representative. Also, Mr. Kurtwater, we met in Brussels in 2009, if you remember. I was one of the journalists there asking about the Macedonian membership to NATO. Since then, we have this ruling of the International Court of Justice. Do you think that this might help to settle down the dispute between Macedonia and Greece?
We're going to have the ambassador come up after this. Would you like to answer that now? Sure. Come on up, and then in the Q&A we can take more questions. Here.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Aki and all the panelists and the moderator for these extremely interesting and worthwhile presentations. I think they covered a wide range of issues relating to the Cyprus presidency of the EU, but also the wider challenges that the EU is facing, but not only the EU, but our region and the world. I think they all touched upon them, and makes you think, do you want to assume the presidency at a challenging time like this? But more seriously, no, for Cyprus this is a momentous occasion. It is a historic occasion for Cyprus. It's the first time that we assume the rotating presidency of the European Union. It is a confirmation of Cyprus's position as an equal sovereign member state. Given the challenges that some of you have described, I think the significance of that is self-evident. And it is, as it was pointed out, an institution of the European Union. It's not a favor to Cyprus. It is both an obligation and an opportunity. And the European Union cannot do anything but respect its own values, principles, and institutions. And with regard to the challenge that was touched upon before, as regards Turkey, Cyprus has made it very clear that both in this and in all other issues, it will be acting as an honest broker, as the President of the European Union, not as Cyprus. It was alluded to before that this is not the time to promote national issues. It's not just Cyprus's decision. You will see with all the rotating presidencies that if you want to be successful and contribute to the European project, you act as the facilitator, as the moderator for the common European interest. It's not the time to promote whatever national interest you have, whether it be political, economic, or other. And this is the case with Cyprus. But at the same time, we expect that this institution of the presidency of the European Union will be respected by all, certainly by our partners, and we appreciate the very clear position of the European Council of last December on this matter, whereby it expressed its regret that candidate country, Turkey, is showing disrespect to this institution and called upon Turkey to respect the institution of the presidency. And we have made it very clear that it's up to Turkey to behave in the way that it is expected of it, and in that way we will be going to responding accordingly, including with regard to the accession process. If Turkey proceeds with implementing its obligations, Cyprus will be more than happy to push that forward. There are a number of issues, and I can respond to them later, but if I can respond to the question that was just put here. The question was with regard to the enlargement priorities of the Cyprus presidency, and also, more specifically, what is the position with regard to the European perspective of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. I have been at the receiving end of this question a couple of times before, and I can only say that there seems to be an orchestrated campaign of misinformation on the matter. Cyprus has clearly stated in its official presentation of its priorities in the field of enlargement that it supports the European perspective of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and that it hopes that developments with regard to this process, especially with regard to the name issue, would be such that will allow progress towards the opening of accession negotiations. But that is on condition that these issues are resolved. And Madam, the foreign minister, when she presented the priorities before the European Parliament, specifically referred to this issue and expressed this hope that developments, especially with regard to the name issue, would be such that would allow the opening of accession negotiations. Therefore, I don't know where this inaccurate information to you and others is coming from, but perhaps you should check your sources again. In fact, we have made a proposal to the government of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia for establishing diplomatic relations. We still have to hear a positive response from the government, but we are committed to enlargement to the Western Balkans and of course to Iceland, and if Turkey responds in a positive way to Turkey as well, considering enlargement as being successful, perhaps the most successful peace project and cooperation project in the European Union history. So I will stop there, and then I can, unless you want me to touch upon other issues.
No, let's do it later.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for that that answer. Next question, gentleman sitting right here.
Thank you very much. I'm Stakis Panagidis. I originally come from the city of Limassol in Cyprus. I was pleased that Ambassador Volker mentioned the Russian factor, the Russian challenge, if you like. I was impressed. I was there in Limassol recently, and the estimates are that close to 50 to 80,000 Russians are permanent residents. Last week, the Russian fleet, ships from the Russian fleet visited Port of Limassol. Historically, of course, there are cultural connections with Russia, the Greek Orthodoxy and Russian Orthodoxy. So my question is, Pastor Volker and also Aphrodakis can comment. It seems to be more interest than just energy side. There are financial, there are many banks, offshore banks in Cyprus. Talking about I was recently in Limassol, and I visited the beach, and I was reminded what my maternal grandmother used to say, and I said in Greek, the blonde race will come to our rescue. Is that going to be Moscow or is it Berlin? I'm referring to conversations at the cafenio, at the tavernas and the local shops. So I would like to hear from the panel more on the Russian connection and the Russian challenge, especially as Syria becomes a problem for Russia. Thank you.
Very good question. Ambassador?
Yeah. Thanks, and I'll take the opportunity also to come back to the ICJ ruling if I should. So, but first on Russia. I guess what I would say is we have to keep in mind that we would like to have the best possible relationship with Russia. We'd like to have the best possible Russia to work with. And the presence of businessmen and tourists and investment and so forth under normal circumstances would be a good thing. So that's the first perspective to have. But the second is that Russia is not a normal country. They don't have a normal government. They don't have a normal leadership right now. And these things don't come without strings attached and without real social, political, and economic problems. And you have them in the form of very close linkages between the Kremlin, between the strategic industries, between organized crime, between intelligence services of Russia operating in their, first what they call their near abroad, but then also in areas of strategic business investment. And so that's where I would urge Cyprus to be very careful. It's a small country with a healthy but a small economy. It is an area of strategic interest to Russia. It is close to Syria, as was mentioned. It has wonderful beaches and wonderful investment opportunities, but it also can then draw the wrong sort of attention from Russia and become yet another means in which Russia seeks to apply pressure on the EU or divide the EU, and particularly to manipulate energy issues affecting the EU. So that's the type of caution I would urge. That's not where anyone would want to be. We want to be working with a democratic Russia, with a Russia that respects human rights and the aspirations of its own people, that operates a transparent and non-corrupt economy, and one that allows for individual opportunity and for normal trade and investment. But that's not what we have now, so we have to be careful. On the ICJ ruling in Macedonia, just to add this to the conversation. So in 1995, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Greece agreed on an international arrangement for Macedonia being able to join international organizations under the name former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And it did this in many cases, United Nations, it's a number of partnerships for peace that NATO has had a number of other affiliations in which it's been able to do that. As Macedonia was being considered for NATO membership invitations in 2008 at the Bucharest Summit, in the year leading up to that, Greece made it clear that it wasn't going to do this anymore, that it needed to have a resolution of the name issue before allowing Macedonia to become a member of NATO or to take those further steps in international organizations. Greece's rationale was that the interim agreement was basically creating a slow motion de facto arrangement in Macedonia's favor that meant the issue would never be resolved. So they said, no, we can't do that anymore. We have to stop this, and we need a solution. It has to be a solution that applies to everything. This blocked the invitation for Macedonia to join NATO in 2008, and hasn't gotten back on track since. In December last year, the International Court of Justice ruled that Greece was in violation. Or no, they didn't. I take that back. They did not say that. They said that the decision not to, I have to find the right wording here, and I should probably get the court ruling out again, but essentially that it was not consistent with the 95 interim agreement for Macedonia not to be able to join organizations under the name of FIRO. I thought this created an opportunity that Greece and NATO, other European member states, also the European Union, would have wanted to take advantage of. Because the name issue became an obstacle to realizing benefits for everybody. That would be greater trade, investment, stability, growth, that would come through normalization of Macedonia's role in all these institutions. That would have benefited everyone. I thought the ICJ ruling was an opportunity that shouldn't have been missed. But unfortunately, I think partly because of the distractions of the Euro crisis, enlargement fatigue, some of the individual member states just not wanting to add this to the burden of other issues that need to be dealt with, including with Greece, no one picked up the ball. And I think now we are probably settled back into the same kind of dynamic that we had been settled into from 2008 onward. And so I don't see this producing much more in the future now. But I do think we missed that opportunity to take advantage, at least positively, of that ICJ ruling.
Let me just comment very briefly on the issue of Cyprus and Russia. You know, I have been involved in politics for a long, long time. And I'm a bit cynical when I hear all these great concerns about, oh my God, you know, watch out, the Russians are the bad guys. We have relations with Russia. We have had economic, political, strategic, social, you name it. Countries are not virgins, they're not innocent participants. They sacrifice a variety of things to promote common interests. Russians and Cyprus have common interests. Russia has played some a significant role at critical times. May I remind you that it was not just Lyndon Johnson's ultimatum to Turkey in 1964 that stopped the Turkish invasion of Cyprus at that time. It was also a similar Russian warning to Russia not to invade Cyprus. It was a Russian step. Again, Russia has its own interests in the so-called near-abroad area, which includes Cyprus. It was a Russian threat of a veto at the Security Council in 2004 that stopped the Anglo-American attempt to pretty much glorify the Annan Plan and condemn Cyprus for not approving the Annan Plan. So, yes, Cyprus had to rely on Russia and will rely on Russia on a number of occasions. Cyprus, I think, is fully aware of the risks and the corruption and the lack of democracy in Russia and everything else. But everybody's dealing with the Russians. They don't have to love them. They don't have to approve of what they do. But that's how interstate politics is played. And I don't think Cyprus is any different than Turkey, having great investments and great economic relations with Russia. So, yes, they have to be careful, but no, the reality is there are common interests, and if and when the needs arise and Russia is willing to come to the help of Cyprus, why shouldn't Cyprus take that help? It helped in 2004, it helped in 1964.
This lady right here, please, if you don't mind going to the microphone.
Hello, I'm with the Embassy of Greece, so sorry I don't want to make it a firearm issue, but because, and this is not the topic of the conference, but because a lot of things were mentioned regarding this issue. I just wanted to say regarding the ICJ ruling, and you all know how much Greece takes into account international law and the opinions of international organizations. However, I have to say that this is that the international organizations such as NATO and the EU have their own ways and procedures for accepting a country. Now, in substance, Greece has always been in favor of enlargement in the Western Balkans. That said, there are always criteria that have to be met, and this is an issue which has to do with neighborly relations. This is an issue which is much wider. However, there is a certain activity lately. The Secretary General of the UN is going to Skopje, and we very much hope that there will be some positive elements. However, the Skopje leadership has not been helpful at all. Just have a look at the statements lately. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This gentleman right here.
Hello, my name is Armin Sahaka. I'm from the Armenian National Committee of America. And since we touched upon the enlargement issue, I just wanted to ask a question to the Honorable Representative of the European Union and the Honorable Ambassador of Cyprus to the U.S. Whenever you speak, maybe you can touch upon this issue of the Eastern Partnership program, and how does the European Union see the future of the Eastern enlargement, in particular of the Caucasus countries, South Caucasus countries, Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, and to the Honorable Ambassador, what would be the Cyprus policy towards Armenia and Azerbaijan during the presidency of the European Union? Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador, is that directed to you?
No, it was the Ambassador of Cyprus.
Okay, I'm sorry. My mistake. I'm going to let the ambassador take this later on. Thank you. Sir?
The European Union attaches a big importance to the Eastern Partnership, and there have been recent reviews of the policies to the light of the principle of more for more, in the sense of more progress as regards to the institutions and the approximation of the countries towards to the European Union framework, and in exchange more integration into the various policies of the EU. So this is something that prevails. As you know, that there is also funding attached to these programs to promote investment, to promote the countries in the region to integrate themselves economically and to the extent possible politically. So yes, not at all. There is no oblivion of the region by the European Union. It's just that we have set for the moment the priorities. There is a number of countries, the Balkans in particular, that have this clear prospect of becoming members, and there is this policy towards the countries in the Caucasus, the Eastern Partnership, and that certainly will be nurtured by us, but making clear that it is on the basis of more for more.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. So this gentleman in the back, if you don't mind, come to the microphone.
My name is Alfred Faroukian, conducting research on peace building in Cyprus at George Mason University. My question is, what kind of European Union do we have where its presidency is occupied by a candidate country? What has the EU done during the past 8 years, not to say the past 38 years? I understand that Cyprus is not going to push its own national and domestic issues during its presidency, but if Cyprus doesn't do that, which EU presidency has done that during the past 8 years or the past 38 years? Thank you.
Anyone want to answer that? Please, Antonio.
Very briefly, we know issues, if not exactly of the same nature, but very similar in the past concerning some of our current member states. And the EU has been precisely the way to solve eventually these type of problems. So just preventing one country of even considering the accession to the EU because there are problems with another member state is not the right way. We take advantage of the integrating force of the EU to overcome these problems eventually.
Please, Mr. Gass.
If I could just put it in a different perspective, I think that in Washington parlance, this is what we would call a pre-existing condition. And so this division of Cyprus, dispute of Cyprus, existed long before Cyprus became a member of the European Union. And I would also say that I think it has been to Cyprus's great benefit to become a member of the European Union. So one wouldn't want the former to get in the way of the latter. It doesn't make it any easier to solve the dispute over the island, but I'm glad that the dispute didn't prevent Cyprus from benefiting as it has from this long period of EU membership.
Well, you know, again, the EU itself is I have been a supporter of the EU from day one for a variety of reasons. But at the same time, the EU has failed on a number of occasions to develop and define a coherent foreign policy. Cyprus happens to be one of those areas where the EU at times has taken a stand, for example, supporting the EU accession of Cyprus, recognizing its government as the legitimate government of Cyprus, and on and on and on. At the same time, remember the divisions that exist within the EU. You have Great Britain, which is the greatest devil, in my opinion, in a lot of the disunity that exists in Europe today. I mean, I don't want to put diplomats from the EU on the spot on this issue, but Britain wants to be in Europe to blockade and create problems for Europe rather than help solve European problems. Financial, political, you name it. Charles de Gaulle was right in 1973 when he said England should stay out of the EU. He has been proven correct, over the years. Anyway, so the EU then has quietly helped. At the same time, it has also shown the limitations of what it cannot do. And the latest twist, again, only having statements that Turkey should not be threatening its neighboring countries and things like that, do not help. Turkey does not acknowledge little statements like that. They laugh them off. Should the EU take more strict measures? Probably they should. But again, think of 27 countries attempting to agree, given their economic and other interests that they have in this case. So yes, the EU has helped. No, in the peacemaking process, the EU has been kept out. And I'll close with one final comment. In 2004, when the so-called Annan Plan came into play, the United States, England, and Turkey blocked the EU involvement in the resolution of the Cyprus problem because Turkey did not want the EU to be involved. And in 2004, as the Cyprus issue was going to the Bergenstock negotiations, the European Union could only be invited as a, quote, observer. It could not be part of the negotiating process. And it was demanded of the EU to approve all the derogations from the acquis communautaire and from the European Convention on Human Rights that were included in the Annan Plan. So the EU became a marginal contributor to the peacemaking process. It did not help because it was deliberately kept out of that particular process. The EU still has the standards that can help resolve the Cyprus problem within the principles on which the EU is based on. But it has not been allowed to develop that kind of potential.
That's it.
Thank you. So I want to bring in the Ambassador Anastasiadis, but first we'll be exiting here, but I want the audience to give the panel a great big round of applause for
Again, thank you to all of you for being here, especially to the panelists, the moderator, and to the president of AKI, Nick Larigakis, for organizing this event. As Mr. Larigakis mentioned when we started, it is a dual occasion, so to speak. It is both on the occasion of Cyprus as assuming the presidency of the of the Council of the European Union for the first time, but it's also 2 days away from the anniversary of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974. And the issue of the continuing occupation of part of Cyprus and the division of its territory and its people since that time, and the European Union have been in some way linked or brought together. And the question arises, is it something that we should keep apart, or something that, a link that can provide opportunities for the future? So I'll start with that. It's our conviction that Cyprus's membership of the European Union can facilitate the efforts to resolve the Cyprus problem and reunify our country and the occupation in a way that will be to the benefit of all its citizens, and in our estimation also be to the benefit of the countries in the region and promote the regional peace, stability and cooperation. The European Union provides the framework, as we heard, the standards, the values and principles by which certain aspects of the Cyprus dispute should be resolved by. We have to be compatible with the fundamentals of the values principles of the European Union. And it will also, in my view, ensure the viability of a solution that will be found in Cyprus. It will be much safer to be within the wider European family than outside with a solution in Cyprus. And it is also, I think, linked to Turkey's European perspective. We still feel that there is a dynamic there that can be re-energized, which will also facilitate efforts to resolve the Cyprus problem. The European Union has consistently called upon Turkey to constructively and concretely contribute to these efforts to reunify Cyprus on the basis of a federal form. We know that Turkey is looking elsewhere as well these days. But one of the things that Turkey is utilizing to underline its significance, geopolitical and other significance in the region, is precisely this: its position vis-à-vis the West, that it is also part of the West, that it is a candidate for accession to the European Union, that it is a member of NATO. If it turns away from this, it loses one of those great assets in its ambitious policy towards the Middle East. So we view the European Union context as a positive one for the efforts in Cyprus and the region. Cyprus is, as I said before, assuming the presidency at a critical time for the Union. We will do our utmost to promote the common European agenda to deal with the substantial financial, fiscal and other crises that we are facing within our family of nations, but also more broadly all over the world. And our motto, working for a better Europe, for its citizens and for the world, will guide our actions. A more coherent and effective Europe, a more efficient, growth-based economy, a Europe that is closer to its citizens and closer to its neighbors are the top 4 priorities of the presidency. Well, I can report that although it is only one of the challenges that the Union was facing, under our presidency, we have already managed to secure agreement for the 2013 budget after some difficult negotiations. I hope that augurs well for the main task ahead for us. A lot of the things that you do in the European Union, as my colleagues know, are not what you determine, they are what we call inherited agendas, things that are on your plate already. And one of the main tasks there is the so-called multi-annual financial framework. And we will be giving due attention and importance during our presidency, hopefully coming to a successful conclusion by the end of these 6 months.